Hello, everyone. Welcome to our blockchain and law series. Apologies on the delay this time.
This is Legal Guide to Smart Contracts.
This one's Legal Guide to Smart Contracts. There you go. So I'm Solomon Lederer, co-founder of Blockmatics, and we do blockchain training, both on the technical side and also on the just from a product manager side, or just from a product development in building out your own smart contract or your blockchain solution. But today, back for the third time, we have Gregory Rigano, who is going to lead us through the legal landscape, because we know this is a very fruitful and interesting area with respect on the legal side, things around smart contracts, and what we're going to talk about today, which would be around the SEC statements, which is constantly updating and evolving, and with regard to ICOs, unregistered securities, decentralized exchanges. Yeah, so we'll take it away. We'll still go for a half hour, and whatever we don't cover today, we'll continue next time. So, Greg, I'll let you.
So did you see yesterday on CNBC, Chairman Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, was actually on saying a host of terrible things about ICOs. It basically said that if you did an ICO in America, you're non-compliant and you have to register. And that's really interesting, because that's like a tremendous blanket statement. Is there a difference between an ICO and a token sale or token generation event?
No, I don't think so. Well, I don't know. What do you? I think these are just different names.
Yeah, I mean, they're different.
Obscure. You know, people said, "Oh, we're not going to call it ICO because that sounds like IPO. So that sounds like you're issuing a security." But then by changing the name, that will somehow insulate us. But at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing, right?
So he's actually at Consensus Invest right now, and he's going to be talking today about this, about how terrible we all are for being part of blockchain world. But let's start with the two actions they brought against, I believe, Paragon, which was the cannabis ICO, and AirFox. Not exactly sure what that was. And what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about how those were like obvious cases and don't do what they did, all the way across the spectrum to even like the Ethereum ICO and what that was. And why that was probably much better from a legal perspective. So for Paragon and AirFox, basically they touted profits in the white paper, and they went around like Reddit and YouTube and talked about how it was an investment and people will make money from it and like all this stuff. You can't do that, even if like with registered securities, because it's especially when you're
just to back up, what was Paragon about?
It was like cannabis, like they're going to build out this whole network around weed. I don't know. Who am I to criticize, Right. But yeah, they would have their own token that's native to their network. But they were like actively promoting, and this is where the SEC got them, is they were actively promoting the profit that you can make from it, which you can't do that. Even if it's a registered security, you can't do that. AirFox was similar. So honestly, like these were two pretty easy cases that even if they were registered securities, it wouldn't have gone well.
And those are, I mean, those were not even the first. What was the very first action the SEC took that was, or statement they made rather, was that on the DAO, or was there anything before? Was the DAO the first?
Putting me on the spot.
Yeah. I feel like that was going back to was it 2016 or late 2015?
Well, they didn't comment on the DAO until 2017.
Oh, I see the comment. Right, the DAO itself happened like a year prior. The comment was much later. But I feel like that was the first one. Well, I'll fact check it and put that in the comments if I'm wrong. Right, and then there's been statements all the way even up until earlier this month, where even the SEC still referenced the DAO with the Ether Delta statement. So Ether Delta is a decentralized exchange where people are trading different ERC20 tokens. So these are Ethereum-based tokens, which they just blanket across the board. They just allow everyone, every token to be exchanged with every other one. They did not care whether or not any requirement of security. What, Ether Delta?
Yeah, I mean, all right. So what I don't want to do today is be like just a typical, like there's like hundreds of lawyers in the crypto space. It's wild. Yeah. It's great because now it's like competition and people are giving out free, essentially legal advice on Twitter. That's what it is. Yeah. No one's saying anymore, this is not legal advice. They're just a bunch of lawyers that are writing stuff on Twitter. So I guess it's legal advice, right? But what I want to do today is like focus on solutions and what to do and what not to do, as opposed to just saying, oh, register with the SEC and oh, do this. Like the best lawyers are paid a lot of money because they can make magic happen and they have solutions for you where you would otherwise think there aren't any. So that's what we're going to do for you guys today. We're going to provide you with solutions. So specifically so do you want to focus on the ICOs first?
It's up to you. You take it away.
All right. So since we started and kind of Chairman Clayton is at Consensus Invest today, maybe even talking as we're doing this, why don't we start with the ICOs? So again, Paragon, Airfox, they touted profits, and they basically said that the money was going to be used to build out the network. So they're basically raising money for something that didn't exist before. And I don't want to say a blanket statement that will always be a security, but the way that they went about it by touting profits and saying that we're going to be doing this, like you guys won't really be doing much. It's going to be all the people that are raising the money that are handling it. That's not good. A way, in my opinion, to have a legally compliant token sale is the following. You want in your white paper or your marketing documents to really just describe the network and the purpose of it and what it's for. You don't want to talk about profits and how people can make money and how this is a speculative investment. Quite to the contrary, you actually want to have in your legal offering documents that this is not a speculative investment and you really don't want to have much to do with trading that goes on a secondary market. In addition, you want to have something built out like on day one, even if it's like basic. You want to have something built out such that when those tokens go live, they can be used to do something, right? So they could actually be used for something.
Other than trading, right?
Other than just speculating on it. Yeah. There is extensive case law. I don't want to say it's extensive, but there is federal case law that basically says if you can use something in a network, it's potentially not a security.
Were there any like analog or non-digital token examples of this before?
Yeah. You want one? You want the best one? So I actually got it maybe last weekend on Twitter. A taxi medallion. A taxi medallion, right? You need to buy, in order to own a taxi in New York City, you need to buy a taxi medallion. Taxi medallion is nothing more than like an access token, right? Because once you own one of these taxi medallions, now you could do work in the system and earn profits, right? And taxi medallions are speculated on. Before Uber came out, taxi medallions were worth about $1 million each, and then Uber came out, and now they're worth about $200,000 each. So taxi medallions are not regulated by the SEC. Whether it's issued by New York City, at a standard price, or it's traded on a secondary market.
Interesting.
And a taxi medallion is a specific thing that you need to essentially enter the taxi network so that then you can do work for the taxi network. So I'm also getting ready to publish a legal memorandum, which I actually put out yesterday. I called for a peer review from the crypto legal community. We'll see how that goes.
Just so we don't forget, where would people be able to find that?
I don't want them to find it just yet.
Okay. All right.
I put it on my Twitter. If you want to look at my Twitter, go to @Rigano ESQ, RIGANO ESQ. It's one of my more recent tweets.
Yeah, we'll put it in the comments as well. And when the memo is ready tomorrow, we'll add that in.
Well, it's actually ready now, but I really want lawyers to comment on it first before the masses are like, "What the heck is this? You're crazy. You're a terrible person."
Right.
But so
speaking of commenting, I didn't tell the audience. Yeah, feel free to put in your comments and questions on the chat window on the right side, and we'll stop in a few minutes. We'll pause to take some questions, and then we'll continue on. And also, I did forget to mention that if you want a higher quality video to come through, just on the bottom right corner, you can click on the gear icon, and you can switch your the resolution, I think, to 1080p, or just put it to the max that goes, and we'll come in a lot sharper.
So let's talk about the New York City taxi medallion, right? So you need to buy it in order to do work. There's already a network of taxis set up, so there's something going on, and it could be used on day one that it's sold. That's really important. But at the same time, you know, SEC, why aren't you clamping down on the speculation in taxi medallions?
Interesting. So this secondary market,
massive speculation going on, and people made a lot of money, lost a host of money.
Right, yeah.
Retail investors don't have to be an accredited investor to buy a taxi medallion, and if you bought it at the top at $1 million, well, you're down 80%.
Right. Just
like Bitcoin. Come on, SEC, you got to get on the taxi medallion market.
So, well, but you're kind of making the case, the claim, though, that it is like a utility token, utility thing.
It has utility on day one. So a team I'm working with called IKU, pumping my own stuff right now. It's not live, you can't buy it, whatever. So we have not gone live yet, but we've essentially built out an alpha in which when we do sell tokens, they can be used to develop intellectual property with a scientist. So Solomon is a PhD in distributed systems. Say you came up with the next generation version of Ethereum, right? And you want to sell tokens to have other software engineers and the crowd kind of help you with it. So they could contribute to it. You're leading technical development, but they have publishing rights. They could challenge milestone deployments, you know, whether or not you should be entitled to fund. Like, so say you raise $10 million. Instead of you getting the $10 million up front, maybe you get tranches of 10 tranches of $1 million each based on hitting milestones. And the people that own the tokens can challenge milestone deployment and say, you know, you didn't complete it to this. You need to still do X, Y, and Z. In addition, those people that have tokens will have like immediate access to you to help contribute to the network. And then say this next generation Ethereum platform is built out and it's incredible. Well, then perhaps you could pay out dividends to those people that is quantified based on the work they contributed to the network, to building it out. Similar to you purchasing a taxi medallion, driving a taxi, and earning profits driving people around, which is based on, you know, how many miles you went, how much time, it's all quantified, right?
Yeah.
So more or less, you're doing a token sale. You want to have a network that is at least somewhat built out, in which these tokens can be used on day one.
Okay.
And then
has the SEC ever?
No, no.
They've never gone against any project. I thought I just saw comments. Maybe it wasn't from the SEC, but some other. I guess there are other lawyers.
I should have done that. That was terrible. You should talk Solomon.
Oh no! I'm just saying the question is, but maybe the answer still remains the same. Whether or not, you know, this kind of discussion that, okay, it's utility, it has some use from day one, that perhaps doesn't necessarily inoculate you from action, or doesn't necessarily mean you are at that point no longer a security. So, well, like for instance, you did say you can't promise certain, profits or.
Yeah, you shouldn't talk about profits.
Right. So even if you are, so that means there are some other requirements of some other, I guess, possible things that you can do that even though you are a security, or are a utility token, will still get you in trouble.
Like saying that the money is going to be used to build out the network. But honestly, I think that's okay as long as kind of everybody has a say in what's happening.
Okay.
So there's also case law. So I'm going to read a few things from what I published yesterday. So there's also case law that cites the Second Circuit, which states that an initiative whereby, here, I want to get the exact language for you guys. It pretty much sounds like a DAO, like a DAO, but it's just like how you go about it.
Right, so just to explain a DAO, so which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which was effectively acted sort of like a crowd-funded or VC platform. So
in which profits were touted.
Right.
They were talking about profits again. And it was pretty much up to a small group of people that decided what was going to happen. But let me just read this to you. This is federal case law that cites the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit is essentially the most powerful court outside of the U.S. Supreme Court. So it goes on to say an initiative that was primarily a means whereby participants could pool their own activities, their money, and the promoter's contribution in a meaningful way was not an investment contract. That's federal case law. Right? So I'm going to read that one more time. An initiative that was primarily a means whereby participants could pool their own activities, their money, and the promoter's contribution in a meaningful way was not an investment contract.
And that was, again, referring to what? Give me that statement.
It was referring to a limited liability company, an LLC, in which I forgot exactly what they were selling. I could tell you the case if you guys want to look it up. It's Nelson v. Stahl, 173 F.sub 2D 153. That's a citation. And the Second Circuit case that it's citing is SEC v. Aquasonic Products Corp. So it's basically
again, we'll put those in the comments.
Yeah, it's an LLC in which it's kind of like a collaborative venture amongst everybody together. So people were buying into the LLC. There was a group of managers and promoters. But because the people that were buying into the LLC had the ability to affect it, to contribute to it, to perform work with it, there was not much of asymmetry between information within the organization. Everyone kind of had similar information, as opposed to, if you're buying stock in Facebook, you don't know what Facebook's doing. You don't know what their next move is. That's a security, right? Zuckerberg's running the show.
Exactly, yeah.
As opposed to kind of like an open source blockchain, which is kind of totally public with, Ethereum. Anyone can participate in the core developer calls. You can get on YouTube and make comments.
Right.
Whatever. It's all public on GitHub. And this is case law I've never seen anybody cite before. I've never heard anybody talk about this. SEC's never talked about it.
So yeah, very likely it's going to be brought up in the future because that seems pretty.
Well, I hope so, and I'm surprised that there's all these crypto lawyers out there.
Never found it. Well, you're one of them, so you found it, and now you could put it out there. Just to go back for a second, because somebody did ask the question, what is an example of a basically utility digital token? But you did give an example of your project. But in terms of some other ones that are already out there that are being used, there is actually a whole slew of them. I mean, there's even different categories, so you have a lot of these.
So you want me to comment on a legally compliant utility token right now?
Well, I think somebody wanted to just know what are some examples of some utility tokens that are out there. So you have a lot of these decentralized storage networks, such as Filecoin.
So Filecoin's not live.
They're not live.
Siacoin. Siacoin is live.
That's live.
Yeah.
There's also.
Did they have an ICO?
They definitely have different token. Yeah. Well, they also have two kinds of coins. Definitely for one of them, there was an ICO, but they also have one that is where you're more involved with the company itself. So I think they did issue with actual security token as well, and legally compliant. But yeah, there was, okay, I don't know if the actual utility token had an ICO. There's also storage, STORJ. That's another one. They definitely had it. They had two ICOs.
A utility token that's currently running. I mean, so Augur.
Yeah, that's going to be my next.
But Augur did an ICO.
Not that great.
Well, they raised $5 million to build it out, but they sold. Essentially, they claimed it as they were selling software licenses before it happened, before it was built.
Right.
I mean, a lot of this stuff was grandfathered in, but like Ethereum today is, I look at it as a utility token. You need to use Ether to move any
perfect example
on the ERC20
we don't even need to
blockchain.
go to the ERC20, right? Because we're going to actually explain, like, so those when we're talking about those distributed files storage platforms, that is in order to actually store data on this distributed network, we need to actually use a little pieces of that token. And Augur also, it's a prediction market, which we're not going to get into, but also to participate in that network, you need a little bit of the token. But as you were saying, Ethereum itself, which did launch or did have an ICO back in 2014, that was to, they're issuing these tokens, which you then need to use the Ethereum platform. Because the way Ethereum works is for every, not just sending Ether from person to person, do you need to give a little bit of Ether as like a transaction fee. But even if you want to do something else on the network, like if you want to interact with an existing smart contract, if you want to deploy your own smart contract to the network, you're paying for every operation that you're doing. So you're
paying for the computation.
Right. So every line in that smart contract has its own associated fee with it. So
another one that's not its own blockchain is Decentraland, the MANA token, in which you use that use that token to buy land in Decentraland.
Yeah, I don't remember this. Is that some kind of like a gaming platform?
No, Decentraland is you're buying real estate in virtual reality.
So is it connected to some game though? I don't remember.
No.
Why
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're buying real estate in virtual reality.
Okay, got to look into this. The next question is, you would think there's an unlimited supply of real estate, but
well, no, it's digitally scarce.
But I thought it was some kind of like a Minecraft type thing where within this world, but there's other stuff you can do in it. Then you want to own real estate.
Yeah, like you could build a hospital in Decentraland.
Right, I see. So it is kind of like a SimCity type thing.
Point is though, is that a lot of these tokens, like Ethereum, Augur, they did this years ago when it was still more of an underground movement, and they've kind of been grandfathered in. So, I mean, if you're going to do a token sale in the US, not only do you have to deal with the SEC, but you have to deal with class action lawyers, and those are the worst. I mean, the SEC only has civil jurisdiction. They do not have criminal jurisdiction. So the SEC is not going to send you to jail unless you commit fraud and like lie to people, Wolf of Wall Street style, and then they bring in the FBI or DOJ or whomever. Notably, Paragon and AirFox, they didn't go to jail.
Right, and as
based on the SEC's, I mean, they might. I don't know. Who am I to say anything? I don't know everything about it. But based on what the SEC did, they fined them and said give some of the money back. And at the same time, Elon Musk, one of the great entrepreneurs of all time, was recently fined $20 million by the SEC one of the biggest hedge fund managers ever. Paulson? No, not Paulson.
Novogratz or?
No, he's not. He's
But while you
straight,
think of it, I'll also refer.
Mark Cuban's been taken to court by the SEC. One of the biggest hedge fund managers ever. I forgot his name. Bald guy, little chubby. He's like banned from trading with the SEC. He's like one of the greatest hedge fund managers of all time. So, you know, it's not like, you know, they find Elon Musk, the guy's trying to go to the moon. The guy's trying to build out solar power. The guy's making electric cars so that we don't have to burn oil and gas constantly, fossil fuels. You know, it's not like, and these are people that are like some of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, and they've had brush-ins with the SEC. So, and notably, they didn't go to jail. And their businesses are still tremendous.
Yeah, which is interesting because I mentioned Ether Delta, the decentralized exchange, and also the guy that started it. His name is Corbin or something like that. I don't remember offhand. And he was essentially just fined about $400,000 and just was let go. I mean, this is a site that's done many millions of dollars worth of I'm sure profit over the last couple of years, and he was really just given a little slap on the wrist and let go. And the SEC said because he cooperated, you know, very willingly, and apparently they kind of pegged him as, even though it's decentralized, where well, I guess that would be a little bit too much to get into now, but it does operate very different from an exchange like Coinbase or one of the, you know, Kraken, one of those. Because potentially he could be removed there out of the picture and the whole system would work on its own. However, there was this front end, the website itself. He was also sort of like the one who would respond to any kind of issues and requests. So
well, the real thing that did it, I have other thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
But he was taking a 0.3% fee
on
every transaction.
That was the point.
That was the thing that really
got him in trouble.
At the same time, you know, so check out like Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin white paper. The first people to use Bitcoin were doing bad things. I heard of Bitcoin for the first time in like 2010. Heard about like Silk Road, and it could be used to hire hitmen. And I was like, oh my God, Bitcoin's the worst thing ever.
Right.
If Satoshi was not anonymous and was known, he likely would have went down a similar pathway that Phil Zimmerman had to go down. Phil Zimmerman created PGP, Pretty Good Privacy, in the early 1990s and had to deal with hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars in legal fees against the Clinton administration, who basically classified cryptography as a weapon and needed an export license if you were going to send an encrypted message out of the country. So if Satoshi wasn't anonymous, I don't think Bitcoin would be as big as it is today. You know, you've heard multiple people that used to work at the DOJ, including Katie Huan. This is like her big claim to fame, is that she was told, she's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz now, she was told when she was working at the DOJ to shut down Bitcoin. So if she was able to subpoena the guy or the group of people who put this out, you know, likely they could have done some things to stop it. Maybe not stop it, but at least cause friction and slow it down. Similar to like we're seeing with ICOs today, which have kind of been hurt in some form in the US.
Right. I mean, definitely, yeah, we're not seeing today the action that we saw last year.
So my point is that for Ether Delta, if he was anonymous and had, you know, his GitHub page, his GitHub account was just ABC123 with a picture of a cat.
And not taking any,
And he operated everything through VPN. And he even did take a 0.3% fee. Well, who are you going to go after? How do you know who this is? Are they going to subpoena then Microsoft, who now owns GitHub, and trace everything back to find out it was him? Probably not, because then people would stop using GitHub, similar to how, you know, Google and Apple won't unlock phones even for like terrorist implications. So the point is that if you are deploying Web3 technology in the United States and you're not doing it in a totally open source fashion. Like, so Web3, like maybe it was open source, maybe it wasn't, but he was taking a 0.3% fee, and he was allowing like global finance to occur and also scams to be traded, whatever, and he was profiting from it.
Yeah, it does open the door. You know, now that they went after Ether Delta, it's very likely they're going to go. There's a whole slew of other decentralized exchanges, like
that's the thing.
IDEX, and now the question is, are they going to go after all of these? And then at one point, and this probably is going to lead into another discussion probably for next time, because we only have another 2 minutes here. But it almost, at a certain point, it just becomes, you have a computer programmer writing some code, they put it out there, they're completely uninvolved at that point. They're just wrote code that is now able to do something on its own that is illegal.
Well, hold on that.
Yeah.
So that's freedom of speech.
Yeah,
so when you're just so if Ether Delta guy didn't take a 0.3% fee and just deployed this code for people to engage in, you know, trading of illegal securities, but all he did was deploy the code. Well, according to the Sixth Circuit of the United States, and this is from, you know, the PGP case with Zimmerman, and this is how the Clinton administration eventually left him alone, because it was determined that encryption is just free speech. Because computer source code is an expressive means for the exchange of information and ideas about computer programming, we hold that it is protected by the First Amendment. That was from the United States Court of Appeals, Sixth Circuit in the year 2000. So, few things here, few concluding remarks. If you are a Web3 developer based in the United States and you're just deploying open source code, I think you're fine.
I hope you're right. Yeah,
if you are deploying open source code and then kind of seeking rent on that open source code, like taking a 0.3% fee to match orders, you potentially have liability. But the interesting question is where it gets to a real developing area, Satoshi style, is if you're deploying open source code, take a 0.3% fee, and you're totally anonymous. And I'm not telling you guys to do that, but if you're totally anonymous, you know, Satoshi, no one knows who he is. He invented Bitcoin that enables for peer-to-peer algorithmic transactions to occur. Doesn't matter if you're Pablo Escobar or, you know, Solomon Lederer, you can engage in this network all the same, just the same way as it doesn't matter if you're a terrorist and you're using the internet, and it doesn't matter if you're, you know, a Wall Street guy using the internet or a teacher using the internet. You have access to the internet.
Yeah, I would just say it maybe remains to be seen if someone, I mean, potentially, and I believe at the DevCon 4, the recent Ethereum Developer Conference, there was someone from some government organization, I don't know if it was the SEC or something, and who made a comment, was saying, like, I mean, what if you have software that allows you, like your example before, like hire a hitman on someone, and your software is enabling something that is really like a blatant or something very aggressively criminal.
Bitcoin made its name on the Silk Road. Silk Road, you could send narcotics, firearms through the mail and get paid in Bitcoin.
Yeah, although there was a good target in terms of you're going after the Silk Road, you're going after the platform that is actually selling the drugs, and Bitcoin was just the payment mechanism.
I understand.
Versus if you're, yeah. Anyway, but maybe we'll leave it. We'll just see if there are any questions. But before we do that, I just want to, I guess, point out we are doing a CLE blockchain course December 4th, the morning of December 4th here in New York. So for those of you in New York, and we're going to go through this obviously a lot more formally, going through the whole legal landscape, not just about the SEC, but there's, you know, the DOJ and just all the other Commodities Exchange Commission. So yeah, and also we're going to go through some of the technicals on exactly what a smart contract is. So I'll be covering that part, and Greg will be covering the legal landscape around this. There's also a second date in January. I don't know off the top of my head, but we'll also post that in the comments. And then, yeah, we hope to see you again next time. We're going to do this on December 11th. We're going to do another webinar talking about just about the EOS token sale. So
yeah, how EOS raised $4 billion, both a legal and technical perspective. It's going to go into KYC AML, which is always fun. Securities laws, how they commoditize bandwidth. And then Solomon will go into the technical side of their daily auction.
Yeah, they have a very, very innovative, essentially smart contract auction that went on for 350 days, where they had a certain limited supply of tokens, and then the price was essentially set by the demand for that day. But yeah, I'll get into that on December 11th. Let's just do a quick look. If we should cover anything else today. Okay, it looks like that's it. I mean, if there are any other questions that we actually did not address, we'll also put that in the comments.
So I have some concluding remarks. Please. So if you are considering doing a token sale, which it's really hard to raise money right now in a token sale, I think this will change at some point in the future. But for whatever reason, right now, the bear market compounded by regulatory action, it's just not the most ideal time. But some things to consider is have an alpha built out. Consider using Gitcoin to do so. You know about Gitcoin?
I don't.
So Gitcoin is by consensus here in Brooklyn, and you can basically post bounties in Ether to get your software built, and it's incredibly efficient to do so. So instead of having to hire high-end developers such as yourself, you can kind of put it out there almost like Fiverr style.
Right.
But it's also important you want to have someone manage those devs because it's totally open, right? So you want someone to be able to vet through their work. So you want to have kind of an alpha built out. The tokens have to have value in the network. Also, I mean, you're rolling dice if you allow people in the US to buy into this thing. Not only from the SEC, but what you're really rolling dice on is if you become extremely successful, even if you just raise like $10 million, there's class action lawyers that are literally going around looking at potential cases in which they can take their 33% fee on. So if you have something that kind of looks like a security and class action lawyers come after you, well, do you really want to spend time and money defending yourself against a lawyer? It's just annoying.
Okay, so that's the third point. So you're saying even though
you just got to be on point.
Token, you could be in a lot of hot water. Nevertheless.
Well, so there's the SEC, which is they've only gone after people that blatantly didn't follow the law. But if your white paper doesn't tout profits, if you have an alpha built out and your tokens are like taxi medallions, And there's federal case law that basically sets out that if it's structured in a certain way, it's okay. So just be really careful on that. And there's a lot of lawyers out there now that are calling themselves crypto lawyers. Just be careful. Ask a lot of questions. Interview as many lawyers as you possibly can, and ask them what their experience has been in this space. Ask them if they know what smart contracts are, what gas on Ethereum is, how to use IPFS, interplanetary file system, and that will be kind of a good gauge of where they are in the crypto space and that they're not just taking money from you. Then for decentralized exchanges, I actually think that there's only one true decentralized exchange out there, and it's even centralized in a way. If you are going to be deploying a decentralized exchange and taking a fee from it in a centralized way.
To, by the way? All right, we'll put it out there.
Yeah, I don't want to say it on there.
You're not saying air swap or okay.
I don't want to comment on it right now. I don't want to cause any issues.
You're saying
there's also, so if you're putting out a decentralized exchange or even centralized exchange, and you're taking any sort of fee from it, that means it's not totally decentralized. And beyond the SEC regulations, there's also the FinCEN laws. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and that's actually KYC AML, and that triggers money laundering laws, and you could actually go to jail for breaking money laundering laws. So definitely be careful on that. On that one, you want to look at the virtual FinCEN, FINCEN, Virtual Currency Guidance from 2013, and it elucidates user, exchange, or administrator. Ether Delta, absolutely would fall into an exchanger, and I'm not going to say anything further on that. And then if you're a dev in the US deploying code and you're planning to seek rent, or you are seeking rent in any form on that code, like taking a 0.3% fee after you deploy open source smart contracts, you're rolling dice. You should really have a lawyer walking your hand through to make sure you do this properly, or to clean up whatever mess you potentially already made. And at the same time, take what Satoshi did as a really great example. The guy created a network that's worth $100 billion or so, and he's anonymous. So if you can stay anonymous, it might be in your best interest.
All right, excellent. So I think we'll leave it up there, and we'll continue December 4th in person, formally, and then December 11th with the EOS webinar. So thanks again for joining us, and of course check out blockmatics.io, and you can get some other blockchain news and information there, and also obviously our courses are online if you want to just learn about what a blockchain is, how it works, and what you can do with it. So see you until next time. Signing out, Greg Rigano, Solomon Lederer.